Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. There is no team right now that is more bubbly than the Arkansas Razorbacks. The sad thing, though, it kind of felt like that they had sort of kind of almost basically played themselves off the bubble. Now, that's not really the case. But remember, they had that really tough 4-game stretch that included at A&M, at Auburn, and Alabama, LSU at home as well. They went 1-3 in that stretch. That's not surprising. And he kind of sat there and said, okay, now it's kind of win time. Final 5 games of the season were somewhat manageable. You had Missouri at home, Texas at home, then South Carolina on the road, then at Vandy on the road, then Mississippi State at home. So to their credit, get those 2 wins against Missouri and Texas. And at that point, you literally felt like, okay, just don't screw up at South Carolina. It'll be a quad 2 loss. If you can just get that game, you're gonna be okay. And I think they basically would have unofficially clinched the tournament. Going into the South Carolina game on Saturday, Lenardi had them as like the next 4 in, so they were officially sort of off the bubble. It's all you need to do. I don't care if you beat South Carolina by 1. I don't care if you beat South Carolina by 100. They're the worst team in the SEC. You gotta figure out a way to get the win. Instead, not only did Arkansas not get the win, how about this? It was statistically maybe the worst half of basketball and arguably the worst game that they have played in decades as they lose to South Carolina 72-53. But that's not really the story. Arkansas with 14 first half points. 14 first half points. I saw some stats that it is the fewest first half points they have had or points in any single half they've had in like since 1987, 88, something like that, which means, remember, they didn't join the SEC until the early 90s. So it is basically the worst individual half that they have played since they have joined the SEC, which was well over 30 years ago. Now, second half, they put up a lot of points, but they can't get any stops. They finished the game with just an ungodly, just awful 15 of 52 shooting from the field. That's 28%, 3 of 22 from 3, 13%. At least they shot free throws pretty well, but it all really didn't matter when you're that bad from the field and that bad from 3. And so after the game, listen, I'm not going to lie, a little bit dark on the Arkansas social media streets. But it was interesting because I did listen to John Calipari. Like, he basically admitted, like, 3-4 minute mark, I said, don't foul. Let's just get out of here and move on. But I bring it up because he said something in the postgame that I did think was worth noting for us and worth discussing, because I think it's easy in a moment like this to think that the sky is falling, that the season is over. And I think it's actually not really the case. So producer Matt, go ahead and play the sound of John Calipari after the game. I thought he said some interesting things.
When you go 0 for 17, shouldn't win a game. Someone got to make a shot. You were 0 for 17, you're not going to be in a good game. I told them 8 games like we played, you were due for a dud. It was a dud. Move on. I said, now, what they did to us, they exploited us near the basket, which my guess is every team will try to do now. So we got to figure that out. But I said, burn.
That was John Calipari after the game. First of all, love the Arkansas communication staff. They do a great job. Appreciate them. Don't know what was going on with that video. That was straight from the Arkansas media team. But let me say this, is because I think people saw the burn the tape quote. And I think a lot of people were frustrated. Cal doesn't care. He's not concerned enough. I actually think it's the exact right approach he should take. And I actually thought some of those comments were very, very, very interesting and relevant and kind of important as to the mindset of that team as they have to get right now going into these final 2 games of the regular season. First off, listen, again, I know that it sounds like excuses, right? I know it sounds like John Calipari doesn't care. Oh my goodness, burn the tape. We're going to move on. We didn't foul. He didn't say it in that clip, but he did say, look, 3-4 minute mark. I said, I want to be back in the locker room in 10, 15 minutes. We don't need to foul. We don't need to extend this. This isn't our day. Let's move on. But at the same time, What I will say, and I know I'll get criticized for this. I know people say, oh, Torres, you're defending Cal like you always do. One, I didn't hate the burn the tape segment comments, because here's the crazy part is like, what are you going to do? Yell and scream because the team was terrible? No, I think you have to burn the tape. I think you have to move on. I'll say this too. The only comment that I actually disagree with in that rant was he said, look, we only have 7 healthy players right now, and 3 of them did not play well. I'm going to actually disagree with Cal on that. I watched that game as much as I could without getting sick to my stomach. I don't think a single guy played well. Carter Knox led the team with 11 points, but that was only because he was 6 for 6 from the foul line. When you shoot 28% from the field and 13% from 3, I'm sorry, I don't know that you could sit there and say that, oh, by the way, 4 of our 7 played well. They really actually didn't. But I will also say this about what Cal said. I know this sounds like an excuse, but I do think this team was kind of due for a dud. And now the question becomes, how do you bounce back from this? Again, sit there, oh, Torres, you're defending Cal. Well, here's the truth. And he said this. Since February 1st, so obviously Saturday was March 1st. February 1st was the day they went to Kentucky. They played 8 super high leverage games from February 1st on, and they went 5-3 in those games. And again, 5-3 doesn't sound great, but when you think about the fact that 3 losses, 2 of them were to top 10 teams on the road. Texas A&M was top 10 at the time. Auburn was number 1 in the country at the time. You lose to Alabama on the road at home. It doesn't seem like 5-3 is good. The only losses were to top 10 teams, 2 of them on the road. And so, yes, they have played 8 straight super high leverage games. And so I'm not making an excuse. But what I am saying is you could see the scenario where they get through not only the Alabamas and the Auburns and the whatevers, but then they beat Missouri, they beat Texas, and they just sit there and say, well, we're going to take care of South Carolina. That's no problem. They're last place in the SEC. I'm not making an excuse. I'm just saying you can understand. We're all competitors. We've all played sports. We've all had that moment where we just took somebody lightly. I'm not saying Arkansas should have. I'm not saying anyone should have, but everybody does it. Auburn didn't show up against Florida and got the doors blown off them. Florida didn't show up against Georgia earlier this week, and they got the doors blown off. And so with Arkansas, again, I do think that, listen, they were kind of due for a dud. I do kind of agree with Coach Cal. Now, the big thing is, how do you bounce back from this? Because now your back is against the wall. You do have to get some wins. They play Vandy on Tuesday night. Vandy, it sounds crazy. Outside of Auburn, is Vandy playing as well as anybody in the SEC? It sounds absurd. You know that Vandy has won 3 straight games against ranked opponents? 3 straight games, including an overtime win against Missouri. We'll cover Vandy in the bubble portion in just a minute. I think Vandy's officially off the bubble. You win against Ole Miss at home, at Texas A&M, and Missouri at home. You're sitting at 20-9, 8-8 in the SEC. You're in the NCAA tournament. So you have to get right against Vandy. You then have Mississippi State, which kind of has been up and down all year. But it's hard for me to get mad at Cal for those comments because I think there's actually some truth into them. I think there's some truth into the idea of like, you know what? It was ugly. We got to move on. We were due for a bad game. Everybody has a bad game. It's how do we respond from that? So listen, Arkansas season is going to be defined these next 2 games. Do you have to go 2-0? Probably not, because the SEC tournament's going to give you a million opportunities if you can win there. But their backs are pretty much up against the wall. You do basically got to go 2-0. We'll see what happens, but this is a crushing loss for the Razorbacks. But again, it's not a devastating one. By the way, I should even mention this. Joe Lunardi put out an updated, bracket sheet. I don't think he put out a full bracket, but he had Arkansas still in the field, even with a loss to the worst team in the SEC on the road. So it wasn't pretty. It's not devastating, but how do you bounce back from here is how you're going to define Arkansas season.